Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Table Manners for Robots. This is now episode 5 in our second series, which we call Unite for Small. Unite for Small is a series that is dedicated to uplifting small to medium businesses in South Africa in any way we can through the use of clever tips, tricks, advice from experts in order to help small businesses get through the difficulty in our post pandemic times. On that note, it is with pleasure that I introduce our guests for today. And our guests, again, are expert in their respective fields. They come with a tremendous amount of experience in helping customers. So they're going to give us practical tips, practical insights, on the ground guidance, not theoretical stuff from a textbook. So with that in mind, let's go to Mike first of all. Mike, please tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, thanks, Krishan, for having me on the show. I was born and raised in Pretoria. I decided after high school, I didn't know really what I wanted to do, so I decided to go hospitality industry, as my father owned a restaurant. Busy with my studies in the hospitality management, I started to focus on hospitality management systems. From there, once I got out of my studies, I was lucky enough to get into a global organization that allowed me to travel the world and install in hospitality management systems. In 2008, the global downturn hit Europe quite hard. So I returned back to SA and started my ERP career and haven't looked back since.
Sounds like quite a whirlwind of a career. Interesting that you wound up in systems in hospitality. There's lots of exciting things to do in hospitality, so it's very interesting that you took the system route. All right, let's go to Ian. Ian, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, Christian. Thanks for having me. I grew up on a farm in Northwest Province, and I was lucky enough to, in my lifetime, be exposed to both analog as well as digital technology. Now, back in the day, connecting to the internet was still music to your ears. Because of the modem that you would connect, and it would make that little noise. So after school, I decided to pursue further studies at the University of Pretoria, and it took me a bit longer than expected, but I eventually got the very expensive receipt as proof that I was there. My dad then encouraged me, and he actually challenged me, and he said, if you go and do your honors and you complete that within 12 months, I'll pay for it. So basically, challenge accepted. But soon after that, I started to get doubts, and you say, what if it happens because my track record wasn't that good at the university? So that steered me towards the job market, and I ended up getting a teaching position at one of the local high schools where I taught business economics and accounting. But after 6 months, I just decided that this is not for me. I don't want to stick around there, but I did, and that brought me to actually get to know SAP Business One, and I fell in love with the product head over heels, and that love affair hasn't ended since.
I don't know quite how to respond to the idea that you've got a love affair with a piece of software, but being that this is Table Manners for Robots, I think it's par for the course. I really like the fact that you've had experience as a teacher, and that you've wound up working with software. It's just a very interesting journey. So thanks for that. All right, so let's go back to you, Mike, for a second. I know that you mentioned the hospitality industry and systems, but what made you specialize in this area of technology?
So coming out of hospitality management systems, you see the impact on people. And as Ian spoke about, it's the impact of people having on life and all that. But with management systems and hospitality, it had a bit of an impact on customers and the organization overall. So from there, I started to spread my wings and decided I wanted to focus a little more on other industries. So I started looking at ways to get it, and I spoke to my brother, and he said, get into ERP. So I started looking at ERP, and that's where I found my love affair, as Ian said, love affair, and you mentioned as well, love affair for a piece of software. I think the love affair comes in, it's a true relationship at the end of the day, because it either hates you one day or it loves you the other day. But at the end of the day, you come out with a fantastic platform for your client. And from there, it came out to be, I enjoyed working with my clients. I enjoyed the fact that giving them a solution that helped their business. And when your customer succeeds, you succeed. And that's what I enjoyed. And that's what I enjoy about my role now, is bringing solutions to my customer and watching them grow. It's my passion now to help customers find a solution that is not too hurtful for the business or not hurtful at all, but helps them at the end of the day. It's a complementary. And it's what drives me to get out of bed, to provide solutions and get my customers growing.
Right. Very, very interesting insights there. Folks, we have two guests on our show who are claiming that they are in love with technology. This may or may not be a problem, but let's have a look as we continue. One of the best parts about the show, as we are told in your feedback, is that you love the fact that you have the opportunity to participate live in the show. You can send questions via the Q&A box. You can send comments and feedback via the chat box. And at any given point, I will incorporate your comments and questions into our live discussion. That's the best part about attending the show live. So make the best use of that facility. Get online, share your comments, even if it's just a quick thought or idea or just a random comment. Feel free to just go and make sure that you're part of this conversation. Interact and participate with our panelists as much as you can. On that note, I'd just like, Mike, for you to just do a quick explanation there. You mentioned the term ERP, and I certainly don't want to take for granted that everyone understands what ERP is. Do you mind just giving us a quick answer? What is ERP?
So ERP in layman's term, or in the market term, is enterprise resource planning. It's an integrated system, so it offers many functions. And there's many out there on the market at the moment.
All right. Okay, so basically it's your end-to-end system for managing a business. So obviously a business, the core of the business is to transact financially. So that's your financials. And then you have all of the associated activities which can affect the financials of the company. And an ERP is a platform to bring all of those different functions together. So that's great. For those of you who don't know what ERP is, feel free to put your questions in the chat box. If you want further explanation, ask us questions. You are invited to interrogate us a little bit. All right. So let's go to Ian. And Ian, tell me, you have alluded to this, but if you could give us just a little bit more insight in terms of what made you specialize in this area of technology.
Well, Christian, I was always interested in business since as a young kid. I had my own little spaza shop on the farm that provided all the essentials to the farm workers, and I had to go and put forward the reason for my spaza shop so that I could get the funding from my dad. So he was my first investor at that point in time. So main reason because I wanted to be like my dad, because he was a businessman as well. Along with his two brothers, he was an owner and manager and responsible for the production line of a brickyard that produced clay bricks. And then on weekends, he would then sort out the farm. So that was one of my main reasons for being interested in business so much. So this is where I learned firsthand how important processes and systems are to provide structure to people's lives. But for them, they were not that fortunate as businesses are today with the systems that we have. So getting into this area of technology was simple for me, and it made so much sense, and it afforded me the opportunity to take the solution to the masses for small businesses out there, because I really believe that small businesses need systems as well that allow them to grow and to exceed. And like Michael said as well, there's something that you want to provide your customer to make a difference in their lives at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you have this this core of or this bloodline and stock of being very entrepreneurial, where you got money from your dad and you set up your own spaza shop as you described. I really love that. And I love the fact that because of that, I know that you would have an appreciation for what a small business out there goes through. And a lot of times I find that small businesses, when we have dialogue, when we have discussions with small businesses, we find that there's a hesitation on their part to reach out to suppliers and to reach out to the very corporate or expert professional services providers, because they feel, but we're too small. We're just a spaza shop, or we're just a our little thing. Like we're not big enough to reach out for professional services help. So it's really good to have you discuss from that vantage point. So on that note, I would like to go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about the situation in South Africa right now. Obviously, small businesses, medium businesses are going through quite a lot. there's quite a big difference between the experience of a small business and a big business during these very difficult times. What is your take on the plight of small businesses right now?
Well, it's tough times out there at the moment, and it's not easy for small businesses. But even before the arrival of COVID, the country has been in a recession, making it difficult for small businesses to keep their heads above water. And that is why it's so important to be able to have the correct information at your fingertips to make bold decisions. Because in our current situation, that is what's required. So SMEs need to make those bold decisions to survive. I read an article in the Daily Maverick the other day, and it indicated that 68% of our SMEs that applied for the government relief funding were unsuccessful. So that makes it even more difficult because we've also seen that many businesses don't have the cash flow to actually sustain them for longer than 3 months. And basically there's a downturn in the global economy as well, and that affects South Africa severely. But there are other factors also out there that influence the growth of small businesses, and like the VAT registration threshold, for example. So that's why it's very important as well to have a system that can actually help you and assist you to actually know when you get to that threshold, or to warn you before you get to that threshold, so that you can go and do your VAT registration at the end of the day. But hopefully it gets revised. Our finance minister did make some promises in the budget speech the other day to say that they were going to look at that and do some revision on that. And then you also have your tax, your corporate tax, high corporate tax out there. That also affects small businesses at the end of the day, because the money that they have to pay out to taxes they could actually use to apply towards growth at the end of the day and strengthening the cash flow position. And one of the major things is that many small businesses, like you mentioned before, Christian, is that they think they are too small. And I think it's really time for small businesses to start thinking big. And to start engaging with digital platforms, because many of us thought that the development of this was based for the future, but we were now actually thrusted into a situation with COVID where this digital platform of business was becoming the only platform to do business on. So if you are a small business, I dread to think what would happen if you don't start adopting digital platforms with your business. It's going to be, very severe. But it's not all doom and gloom out there, if you think of it, because our entrepreneurs and our small businesses are very resilient. If you look at the example of Bottles, that's that alcohol delivery app. These guys were put in a very, very bad position because of the alcohol ban in the country. But they quickly reacted to that risk, and they used it to their advantage because they started negotiating with some of the retail stores out there, and now they're delivering food as well. So the main thing is there that as a small business, you need to react to these changes in the market and use it to your advantage at the end of the day, even though it's tough out there.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you're saying to use these situations to one's advantage. The reality is that when you present that sequence of data points, the fact that there's quite a large percentage of COVID relief applications that have been declined by the government. There's also, many other factors currently that are creating excessive pressure on a set of businesses that, by your own admission, have, very limited cash flow to carry beyond 3 months. So taking all of these factors into account, it does sound a bit bleak. I mean, I want to pick up on this point a little bit more. Sam here is asking a question. He says, what should you prioritize as a small business, developing systems or waiting for an upturn in the economy as finances are tight? I want to just give my knee-jerk response to that in line with what you've said. You did say that the opportunity is there and we need to look for it. In my estimate, taking into account that there's so much pressure, whether it's from the taxman, whether it is from less disposable income in the market, whether it's from other constraints that have been imposed on the execution of your business because of COVID, no matter what, we are now in a situation where small businesses are being they have to be very precision in the way they manage the practice or the business, because margins are limited, things are tight. we don't have as much play in the system. So in my estimate, and I'm just going to give a knee-jerk reaction here to Sam, and that is that, as much as we may say, oh my goodness, spending a little bit on the system is actually, a little bit scary to do because, cash flow is tight, as we're discussing. But I can't see how a business is going to survive in the absence of a system. Of course, as long as it's the right system and we're not being foolish about it, I don't see how a business is going to survive in the absence of the right investment. So for me, this is a case of, when you look at the business arena today, it's a case of you either, if you can't take the heat, then get out the kitchen. If you can't make that little bit of extra investment, then might as well just fold and give up now, because there's no way you're going to be able to run a business effectively in the absence of a system. I mean, that's the extreme degree that I've gone to in working with small businesses and dialoguing with a lot of business owners. I see how meticulous management of margins, using correct data, monitoring actual data, not just listening to the rumor mill from the newspaper, but actually observing your own data points. This is the time when data is critical, and monitoring your business with precision is critical for survival's sake. So it's hard to survive in the absence of the right systems. Obviously, at the right price point, smart investments, not just blind spending. So that's my knee jerk. I'm not sure, Ian, whether you have anything to add to my rant.
Yeah, Christian, I agree with you there, because you have to think of what is the risk, or what is the cost of not investing in that. So if you don't have the correct system, sooner or later the cigarette box accounting is gonna cause some problem for you. If your pack of 30 is done and your wife throws away your cigarette box where you had all the information on the back, you're going to be in some serious trouble. So yeah, no, I totally agree.
Okay, good. So, Ian, let's just keep the conversation going here. Let's talk about regulation a little bit more. With all of the challenges that's occurring, with all of the surprises in the market, are the regulated industries in our country, are they employing stricter controls or more relaxed controls at this stage?
Well, I think under the current situation, deregulation is not on the cards. So we are seeing more stricter regulations put in place. Mm-hmm. And now with COVID as well, you're seeing per industry, some of these industries that weren't even regulated before now have to adhere to certain regulations, especially under COVID. So there were a couple of companies that saw the opportunity in the PPE market, and they started jumping on that bandwagon. But if you go into this PPE market, you have to be, very certain that you adhere to all the regulations that cover that market, because for PPE you've got the different equipment, you've got the masks, you've got gloves, you've got sanitizers and disinfectants, and each of those products fall under a different regulation. So if you do cloth masks for ordinary sentences where you don't do that N95 mask, then that is not as regulated. So you would be fine if you take your current production environment and convert it and do that. But if you go into the surgical and respiratory side of the mask, you have to make sure that you know what the Medicines and Related Substance Act says. You have to adhere to the Occupational Health and Safety. And then you also have to adhere to the Health Product Regulation Authority, where you have to make sure that you register and that you comply with all those regulations. So seek advice, make sure that you comply at the end of the day, and don't go and do something that will get you into big trouble. So I do see stricter regulations coming into play here.
Very interesting. So for a lot of the folk who are rightfully, and I do support this, who are trying to, for lack of a better term, cash in on the PPE opportunity, for those who have gone in and created some products and services inside that area, what we're saying is that they are evolving regulation. It's definitely not being relaxed, and in fact we do need to read some of the fine print to make sure that we can adhere to this, to the regulation, and that we can afford to adhere to the regulation, and that needs to obviously be backwards baked into the price. It's not just a quick get rich quick scheme where we just go and cash in and run away, right, Ian?
Yeah, that's correct. And on top of that, the COVID regulations that we still fall under, we've got the curfew, rule that still applies, and that also affects small businesses in a bad way, because especially the restaurant industry and the entertainment industry. But yeah, it's not a quick thing. So make sure that you adhere to the regulations. But even non-regulated industries now fall under regulation. So just make sure you comply at the end of the day.
I mean, that's an interesting point, that last sentence of yours. So just if you wouldn't mind expanding on that, are there any new regulations that we don't know about?
Well, I think at the moment, the Poppy Act was introduced. It came into force on the 1st of July. But I think with all the COVID news and the different levels and people sitting on the edge of their seats to see which level we're going to go next, the whole Poppy Act, I think, was overclouded. So I don't know if everyone realizes that each business, from the 1st of July, each business out there has 12 months to fully comply with the Poppy Act. And contraventions of these act can lead to some serious issues. You can get jail time, or you can get fined up to 10 million rand. So if you're a small business and that happens to you, that you're basically going to close your doors. And then from a food perspective, we were actually in a very fortunate position in our country, because there were already advanced regulations to protect us due to, I don't know if you guys can recall the Polony plague outbreak that we had, aka listeriosis, in 2017. This forced the food industry to have more stricter regulations implemented. Just to mention some of these. When you have a production and you're busy with food, they have to implement a cleaning schedule for the food preparation space. Detailing who cleans, where it gets cleaned, how it gets cleaned, and what they actually clean. And on top of that, they have to use color coding to separate the different areas. For instance, you've got the production area, and then you've got the front of house area, and you have to color code your cleaning material with those areas. For example, you can't go and use your blue color-coded equipment to go and clean the red area, or vice versa. So you have to be very, very diligent with that. And then you also only have to use SANS approved cleaning chemicals for that. And there was also then a two-step cleaning that needed to be followed. First, you had to degrease, so basically removing all of the protein buildup, and then disinfect, where you remove bacteria, or in this case, any virus at a microscopic level. So those lessons already, assisted us with COVID when we went into that on the food side. And then just from a fruit and vegetable producer point of view, you have to be at least compliant with the global GAP, which is good agricultural practices. Otherwise, you aren't allowed to actually sell globally or locally. So yeah, so there are some rules out there that we need to comply with at the end of the day.
This is very interesting, Ian. You mentioned many things in that answer. You mentioned heavy regulation. You mentioned the fact that listeriosis was possibly, who knows, a bit of a good setup pre-COVID. You also mentioned penalties, jail time, all of these scary things associated with working in a regulated industry. So just candidly, should small businesses, in the face of tight cash flow, should we just abandon regulated industries and just move on, or should we hold on?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. But as always, it's challenging times for entrepreneurs, and you don't become an entrepreneur if you don't want to take on challenges. Like you mentioned before, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. But we're all challenged to find new ways of doing business while still complying. Some might find other opportunities altogether. Like, if you look at the Bottles app guys, they found a different opportunity, amidst all these regulations that are out there. And then in some areas, new technologies might change a complete industry, regulated or not. So I personally think that they should hold on. There might be challenging or challenges with adhering to these regulations, and there might be costs involved. But with a smaller organization, a small business, compared to bigger organizations, small businesses are a lot more agile. And at the end of the day, passion is key. Is it your passion as an entrepreneur to be in that industry? and smaller businesses can adopt a lot quicker. And I think, like I mentioned before, it's time for small business to start thinking big, and not be scared of this. Get the right systems in place that will assist you with compliance. And I don't see any reason why you should get out of an industry that is heavily regulated.
Thanks for that, Ian, and that does in fact give us all hope. So on that note, we have a comment here from Solomon. He says, it sounds really valuable. I have learned more. Okay, so thanks for that, Solomon. Mike, I just want to let you know that we have not forgotten about you.
No, it's fine.
So let's talk a little bit about market opportunity here. And before we get into that question, I just want a quick reminder to all of our delegates, our attendees, please participate. Keep sending these wonderful comments and questions through. There's a lot of stuff coming through. We are making sure we go through all of them, and we will in fact ensure that every bit of your comments and feedback is taken into account before we move on. All right, so back to you, Mike. If you could open a new business today, what business would that be and why?
So coming off Ian's question about taking risks and being passionate about it, I would say looking at where we are now post-COVID or in COVID and where we're heading to post-COVID, the build up to COVID with the SME market, I would say drop shipping. When people hear drop shipping, they go, oh no, Wish, or they go Alibaba, or they go all the big ones, eBay and Takealot. I would say shift your focus in drop shipping away from the international markets. We all know the tough times we're having getting post into the country, parcels. I think a friend of mine placed something on Wish at the beginning of COVID. We hope it's not a scam. Everybody hopes Wish is not a scam. Who can really not refuse that $1 item? But we're still waiting for that to come through. But I believe drop shipping in South Africa has still got a long way to come. I think it's a market in this country now with COVID that is an opportunity out there. Let's focus on this, our colleagues, our business partners out there. Let's bring drop shipping in. There are a lot of SME companies out there that didn't react quick enough. That didn't get onto the digital bandwagon. They didn't have the systems there, but they still got a vital product. Let's fill that gap where we can go out and be the drop shipper, get that product to market, get it on the global, build that relationship with everybody, get that value chain up and running with SME. Let's be that proudly South African and do that promotion. I think there's big value out there now for drop shipping and focusing on the local market, as I said. And from there, we can all grow. I think it comes down, as we don't refer to suppliers and customers anymore. We refer to them as business partners. Because if your customer succeeds, I succeed. If my supplier succeeds, I succeed. If I succeed, my supplier succeeds. So let's change that onset. Let's change that look. I think there's still a lot of opportunity here in South Africa, and this is why I've chosen to focus where I am on small and medium enterprise to get that value. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of opportunity out there, and I think drop shipping is one of the great ones out there to look at for local.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks also for asking the major question. Is Wish a scam or not? I cannot tell you the number of times I've looked at that
really,
show up.
Who really wants a $5 sneaker anyway?
Yeah, as you can see, guys, on Table Manners for Robots, we address the important points. We're all about making sure that we give you pearls of wisdom. All right. So, Ian, tell me, should we be pricing up or pricing down during this time?
Well, yeah, that is a good question. But I think even before this time, we got in. It was on everyone's mind. But I think the challenge of pricing is not necessarily different than before. But the situation that we're currently in, I think it's putting a bigger spotlight on it because of turnover being under pressure. And every sell you basically counts. So the reality is you cannot sell below cost for any extended period of time. That's just not going to be possible. But in the same breath, our consumers are also under pressure. So it's that vicious circle at the end of the day. But the trick at the end of the day is to price more cleanly or find significantly different cost structures that allow you to price your products so that your margins are still in place. Yet your customer finds, the value in the product at the end of the day, because consumers tend to pay for perceived value. even if it's tough times, if you find a product that's valuable to you, you would pay that bit of extra money for that product. But what should we do? I think, like I mentioned, strengthen your brand so that your perceived value for your brand is a lot higher. Make sure that you recover and you manage your costs very closely. Like you mentioned before, our margins are tight during COVID. But even before COVID, during the recession that we were experiencing, know the competition and what your competition is doing out there. So that will also give you a bit of an idea, and understand your market. Know what your ideal customer is like, so that you can target that customer at the end of the day. And then I would also say innovate. If you look at the raw coffee company in Dubai, that actually just used to sell B2B, and they had roughly 40 deliveries per day that they did. They decided in COVID that they had to do something, and they went with a B2C approach, and that 40 deliveries per day ended up being 150 deliveries a day, just by changing their focus. But ultimately, in the end of the day, cash is reality. And if you need to make a sale, to generate the cash, even if you have to cut away some margin, so be it, because at the end of the day you need to live to trade another day.
Very interesting. I mean, it's good that you used the coffee example here. We have a question coming through from Tandal Wetu, who's asking, the question here is, I would like to open a coffee store in Cape Town. There's a discussion here about the location of the coffee store, but ultimately the question is, do you think it would be a good idea to open a coffee shop in the city?
Yeah. I'll take that one there. I think.
Oh, go, Mike.
So if we look at that, there's a very good example here in Menlyn and Maine in Pretoria. There was a guy these container shops that are popping up everywhere. I think they're a fabulous idea pre-COVID. But I think then there was this other guy here in Johannesburg that had the tuk-tuks, or the tuk-tuks, I can never pronounce this right, that had a coffee machine in the back. And what he used to do is he used to target all the events and outside the JSE. I think if you can make your business mobile and you can offer that value of perception and you can get out to your customers, you can hit the cities on the weekend, you can go to Cape Town and hit the parks. It all depends. If you're going to focus just on coffee, make it mobile. If you're going to do a bakery, then I would focus in an old part where the tourists are, where everybody comes in. So it really depends on as Ian mentioned, who's your market? City of Cape Town's lovely, but on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday, it's dead city. Everybody's out in the winelands. Everybody's out there. So it really know your market, like Ian said. That's a fabulous opportunity. I'm an avid coffee buyer and drinker. I'm going to buy coffee when I retire and win the Euro Lotto. I was going to buy my own coffee plantation. But right now, I think, as Ian is alluding to, know your customer, know your market. I feel brick and mortar is on its way out, especially with COVID. So yes, I would say it's not a bad idea. Everybody loves coffee. It's one of the fastest growing luxury goods. Just know your market.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think that's a very good point, and I think that you're insisting upon doing good, accurate research, looking at data, not just jumping to conclusions. And I think if there's anything that's coming up as a very strong theme throughout the entire Unite for Small series, it's that single point. Decision making has to be a lot more precision in a post-pandemic future. If you're making notes, write that down. Your decision making has to be based on data. It cannot be based on gut feel. Because how, pray tell me, do we make gut feel decisions in an environment where we have no gut feel that actually has a place? Our gut feel no longer has a place in the post-pandemic environment because we've never had to deal with this before. So how do we expect to employ gut feel at this time? We can't. We have to use data. And it's one thing to say that, let's abandon brick and mortar. and let's go completely online. I personally, my kind of gut feel is telling me we should do that. But who knows? Maybe there could be something that's happening in the City Bowl in Cape Town that might play into Thandolwetu's favor. So your advice about examining the data, examining the actual what's going on the ground, going and surveying businesses, looking at hours, looking at the times that people are buying coffee, those people who are in fact going back to the office, looking at all of those factors, looking at the fact that the City Bowl is sort of protected from load shedding. That might still be an incentive for a lot of business owners to go there. That could be a reason why coffee would still be relevant in that area. So there's many factors to consider. So do your homework, absolutely, and make your decisions rely on data and not on sentiment and pure opinion. Okay, good.
Correct. Christian, if I just add to that. Like you mentioned, do the investigation and see if there's not a possibility to, I'm going to make my own word here, e-commerceify your business. And because that's what the Rogue Coffee Company did. They work on orders that come in, via the internet, and then they go and deliver those cups of coffee.
Very interesting. So on that note, earlier, Ian, you mentioned in your earlier answer, you mentioned the pressure on margins. And I think that's very relevant at this stage. There's so much pressure on margins. We don't know necessarily exactly how profitable we are, and we've all gone through a period of just scrambling, and now we kind of like stopping. And while the dust settles, we're trying to figure out how profitable are we as a business. So how do we, as business leaders, how do we keep a good handle on these costs of ours?
Yeah, that's always a good question. So managing the bottom line has always been extremely important. And if you understand your input cost that your business model is built on, because, when you started your business model was built on a certain set of costs. You can ensure that you manage or limit those costs where possible, and that should impact your bottom line at the end of the day. So there are a couple of things I can think of, like manage and monitor your deviations from your normal cost structure. And if there are deviations, immediately address those deviations and analyze and understand why those deviations are there. Those deviations might be relevant due to the way that the market is changing, or it might be because of certain inefficiencies. Then go ahead and embrace technology, because if you don't embrace technology, you might not have the systems, the proper systems in place that can assist you with cutting costs or to handle the cost better, because your system will help you identify inefficiencies and wastage, and also alert you regarding to those deviations that I mentioned before, because it's very important to manage those deviations. And if you do carry stock, maybe look at adopting a lean stock management system. Like Michael mentioned before with his business idea, with the whole drop shipping approach. Make stock, if it's possible, make the stock carrying someone else's responsibility and not yours. Outsource non-core business activities. If it's not part of your core and it's distracting your focus from your core business, look at outsourcing that. Cancel any unused services that is causing additional input cost. Look at going green. I know the going green is fairly expensive, but at the end of the day, in the long term, you're going to save on input costs. And when Eskom decides to flick the switch, and hello darkness, my old friend, then you're up and running and you can still continue working. And avoid penalties by paying your suppliers on time. Look at repetitive tasks that also influence your cost, and automate those tasks. But at the end of the day, ensure that you don't have disparate systems, and that all costs and revenues are recorded correctly in real time on a transaction by transaction basis, so that you're able to monitor your and manage your margins. Because you don't want to get today's news tomorrow, then it's already too late, because then the ship has already sailed and you've already lost a lot of money. So the key here is real time. Have your information real time, so that you can react on these deviations in cost, and then basically go and identify your risks and know those risks, and and manage those risks with your platforms, your digital tools, and monitor those areas. So if you don't have anything in place that can assist you, basically at the end of the day, to manage your costs, you're flying blind. And sooner or later you're gonna hit a brick wall.
Yeah, absolutely. A very, very valid advice. Really making sure that we monitor our costs, keep them as variable as possible, reduce fixed costs where we can, make sure that we're paying out when money's coming in. So those are all fantastic pieces of advice. And I think that, it's one thing for us to say these things, but to put them into effect requires some degree of insight and systemization. In order for me to be able to make a call on where I'm wasting money, I'm going to need to see a clear list of where the money is going. And I'm going to need to see those suppliers that are offering me favorable terms and those that are not. So all of these, decisions do depend on insight. And if we don't have the systems to give us that insight into how we're paying and how we're managing costs, it becomes very difficult to implement what you're saying. So thank you for that, Ian, again. I think I want to just, spend a second here requesting that, number one, please, if you do have a question, please put it into the Q&A box. I do have some questions coming through. I'm going to ask that you please put your question into the Q&A box and not just the chat box. In fact, to be honest, I would prefer just the Q&A box. It just makes it easier for me to get to everyone and to keep track of what's happening. So that's just a quick favor from my side. The next thing is that we do depend on your feedback. In order for us to continue building out these shows and giving you quality content, we want your feedback. So please take a second to click the link that Taryn will put into the chat box. And there you'll find a few questions where it's just a few drop-down answers. So it's going to take you no time at all to give us some rapid feedback. But we really value your feedback, and we do want as many of those feedback forms as possible. So please take a minute and complete that. We're not at the end of the show. We're just past the halfway mark. We're getting into the meat of the discussion, so don't leave us just yet. But do start completing your feedback forms, because that's already going to give us some insight. On that note, I want to just go over to JK. JK has placed a question in the question box. As South African business persons and or entrepreneurs with vast pools of knowledge and know-how, what is your advice for digital advertising opportunities in South Africa in light of Eskom and power supply and crime and vandalism? When I say digital advertising, I'm talking about remote content, controlled totes, kiosks, bus stop advertising, train station advertising, traffic light intersection advertising. So, just my knee-jerk reaction is that no matter what the traditional methods you've employed pre-pandemic, the reality is that you have to change your advertising strategy post-pandemic. Whether we like it or not, we have been forced more aggressively into the digital realm. I'm not going to comment too heavily on the relevance or the continued relevance of the more traditional forms of advertising like bus stops, etc. However, I will say that you are going to have to rethink the strategy in general. It has to, even if you don't abandon old formats, you're going to have to start introducing new formats more and more and more. Consider things like going onto YouTube and putting, some YouTube video advertising. Maybe consider advertising on Spotify. Maybe consider some other formats where people are going to be showing up a little bit more regularly than just at the bus stop, because things are changing and things have changed. I'm not sure, guys, whether you want to give that a stab in terms of digital advertising at this point.
I just want to reiterate what you were saying, Graham. I was listening to 702 yesterday, and Sanrail came onto the news. And during level 5, level 3, and level 4 lockdown, they've seen a decrease in e-tolls, the controversial e-tolls revenue take on. Now, this just brings me to the back to the fact that I think bus and billboard and all those type of advertising are going to take a huge knock that we're going to see in the future now, with the drive for everybody to be working remotely and the drive to be working at home and the work being done there. Less people are traveling. You can see it through insurance agencies jumping on the bandwagon with Discovery saying they'll give you 25% of your premiums back if you drive less than 250. You've got naked insurance coming back, where my neighbor got a quote for his car because he hardly drives anymore at 80 Rand a month. It's unseen. So I think, as you're 100% correct, there are so many new digital avenues coming out. Spotify, YouTube Music, where you could slot your ad in. I think it's embracing the digital age. With this COVID, I've heard a frightening statistics, not frightening, it's actually a very good statistic, is that with this COVID, we've been slingshot 4 years in advance into online shopping. They haven't seen this precedent in online shopping, and they predicted it would have taken us, if we had stayed on the same course without COVID, we would have taken us 4 years to get to where we are today.
Wow, that's a fantastic datum. Jeez. So, I love this discussion about how business is actually moving forward and how we are being forced into this new future that we were going to get into anyway, but we were just accelerated into that reality. So on that note, a lot of the South African businesses have still continue to pride themselves on their knack. They've always done things a certain way. In this case, it might be advertising. In other cases, it might be the way they measure their input costs or the way they keep track of their business costs, or even how they just keep track of their recipes. They pride themselves on their knack. And, they refute the need for systems or a more methodical way of going about things. What is your response to that, Mike?
Look, I'm not disputing the fact that business owners, SME business owners, don't know what they're doing. They do know what they're doing. They wouldn't be trading for 5, 6, 7, 10 a year. The scenario comes down. If your business lasts past 1,000 days, you are successful. So you're doing something right. You're not your decision making, your assumptions, and all that are doing something right. But with us being flung so quickly into the digital age because of COVID and where we are, it's your thinking and your decision making has to speed up as well. If you don't have the right data in line in the system or a reliable system, you can't make that decision. You can't afford to get out of your chair now, walk across your factory, outside your door, down the stairs, cross the parking lot to go talk to your sales manager because you can't get him on the phone because he's trying to make deals. You can't afford to, as Ian mentioned, not have your recipes in a system to see how the costs are affecting your business. You need that information on hand. You need that business continuity. If I'm a business owner and I'm out at a customer, I don't want to have to get on the phone in front of my customer and have that perception of he doesn't know my business. I want to have that in my hand going, Mr. Customer, I see your orders are down by 20%. What can I do to help you? Why are we sitting in this position? Or, you're 30 days behind payment. Listen, what can we do to help me move forward? So I think, yes, I'm not disputing the fact that business owners don't know what they're doing. They know their industry. They know why they got in. They've got the passion. They've got the knowledge. It's just added help now. It's that little boost up into the market to get you going first, quicker and faster. If we look at the PPE example, a lot of people jumped on the PPE, jumped on hand sanitizer. If you didn't have the data at your hands to see what your equipment can and can't do, what your sales, what your stock holdings were, it took you 2 times longer to get to the market. Where the guys that knew the information on their stock holdings, they knew what their machines could do, they knew what the capabilities were, they knew their marketplace, they could make that decision, turn around, and they were up and running, and then they were going. So I do believe, I have nothing against people's knack, and there's been some great business decisions to buy Apple shares because some madman told them not to, but it comes to a point where you need assistance and you need that leg up. And that's what systems give you. That data gives you the leg up over your competition.
Absolutely. Well said. I really like that. So we got a comment here from Rodney. Before I give you the comment, guys, another call to action from my side. Please take a second, click the link in the chat box and complete the survey. Very vital for us. This gives us feedback on the show. It's your way of communicating directly to us. And it's also your way of reaching out to the speakers. If you have deeper questions, if you'd like to have a one-to-one conversation, we can help you with that. We can coordinate that. Please put that comment into your survey link and we will be sure to make arrangements post this event. We're not quite done. We have a little bit more to go. We're really getting into the meat and the heat of the discussion here. So let's go to Rodney's point. Rodney says, listening to your guest speakers is for me probably worth getting, he says it is for me probably worth getting a website advert or something similar that is not too expensive. Is a website expensive and would it be worth it? Are there website designers available to do this, not too expensive? What would a price range for a small business what is the price range for a small business? Rodney, my knee jerk, I'm just going to give you my answer here. I think that this does require a little bit of a check-in, because we're not sure whether you're referring to a full end-to-end e-commerce platform where you're actually trading product, which in my opinion you should be doing. If you're thinking website at this point, you shouldn't just be thinking of putting an online brochure together. You should be thinking about how can you trade and transact and make money from your website. That's how you've got to be thinking at this time. So the scope is not just about a website, but it's about making money from the website. That should be the question. Otherwise, it's just a website for the sake of a website. I do feel, Rodney, it is my advice that you put in a little note into the survey form, and we will have a broader discussion about it with you one-to-one, because I do think that it warrants a deeper dive. So thank you for that, Rodney. Matthew, I'm just going to give you a quick comment here from Matthew. He says, Kirushan, I know you are a big advocate for digital ads and digitalizing Africa. We a digital marketing agency, as you know. Okay, good. So Matt, it's a little bit of a long comment there, and I will go through it in a second. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make sure that I jump to a question before I read the detail of your response, Matt. So let's talk customer situations. Ian, let's go back to you for a second. Any customer situation that stands out to you in your time of doing this work?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of, but one in specific. We came across a customer that had the normal debit and credit system in place to get those transactions and invoicing done, but from an operational point of view, they were on a paper-based system. And the big issue with being on that paper-based system was that, like I mentioned before, if you don't have the information at hand, you're basically flying blind. So you would have sales representatives selling the product, and they would not know if they're actually sticking to the margins, because it could have happened that the new stock that you brought in, especially because they had raw materials coming in from overseas, being affected by exchange rates and landed cost, that sales representative might be pricing the product and he might be selling below cost. And they would only find that out after the quotation was accepted and after they would start with producing the products. And from a production perspective, they also did not have scheduling ready. So they did not see what was on the production floor and what they were busy with, and if they had the capacity to basically support the new sales that came in. So this caused major issues for them with stock losses and with actually losing some customers as well. So when they ended up addressing this, which was a very good point in time, because if they did not address it at that point of time, I don't believe that they would be around today, as a success story for themselves. So yeah, that's from that side. The major problems that they were facing was they were flying blind because they didn't have information. They couldn't manage their production floor. They were losing business that way, and it was a major issue for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Valid. Go ahead, Mike.
And just stepping off from that, and this is one of our customers, because we had the proper systems in place, they were one of the first ones to step onto the I wouldn't say the full PPE bandwagon, but they were able to repurpose their machineries to get sanitizer to the market when we had that sanitizer shortage. They were able to keep the continuity of their business throughout the whole of Africa running because they had the correct systems in place. So it just goes to show a little bit of investment and a partnership over time can help you through the bad times.
Absolutely. I think that's a very valid point, guys. I'm glad that you were very frank about that. Jumping back to Matt's comment here, I'm gonna read a piece of Matt's comment here. He says, and I really buy into this strongly. He says, I just want to bring it to South African business owners' attention that it's actually very inexpensive to advertise on Facebook, Instagram, Google, and YouTube in South Africa. The competition is much lower in South Africa, and most South Africa businesses simply aren't running ads like overseas. To be honest, South African clients are much easier for us to get amazing results with using digital advertising than overseas. This is simply because there's so much less competition in South Africa. In my opinion, there's real opportunity here. Okay, good. Thanks so much, Matt, for that. And that's absolutely true. We find that the rates of bidding, the way in which these platforms charge for advertising, because there's less competition, the bids are lower, and you can get a really good deal in South Africa from a digital advertising point of view. So thanks a lot. Very valid comment from Matt. All right, guys, as we start heading towards the close of the show, we're not quite done, but please, just another reminder, please complete a survey so that we know exactly where you stand and what you're thinking. If you have deeper inquiries, if you want to talk websites, if you want to talk e-commerce, if you want to talk, you have a query for any of our speakers, just let us know on your feedback forms, and we will be sure to answer every single response that we get. All right. Now let's go into cash flow. Ian, before we wrap, I think we absolutely need to confront this difficult point of cash flow. If you could just give us some practical advice.
Yeah, I think we've all heard the saying, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality at the end of the day. So understand your numbers, check that P&L, but don't forget about the balance sheet. So if you do have debt out there, make sure that you manage it effectively. Avoid using your credit card to pay for small debt, because credit cards normally have a higher interest rate. Run a tight ship regarding your debtors, because you can have the most beautiful income statement, but you can't pay someone with a financial statement. So make sure that you manage those debtors and you get paid on time. Don't tie up your cash in stock, like we mentioned before. Try and run a lean stock system. Budget, stick to your budget, and I think if you do that, from a cash point of view and cash flow, you should be able to have cash in the bank to pay what needs to be paid.
All right. So that's a great point on cash, and I think very simple, practical advice. And I think that the concept of cash is king has never been truer and more real to business owners. And I really think that COVID was an opportunity to just get real, and it was a little bit of a reset. There were lots of interesting things going on with businesses doing well and things looking great on paper, and of course COVID hit, and then the reality showed itself. Unless you have cash, you're not going to survive, and all that wonderful paperwork and all of that wonderful wealth on paper means very little in the absence of cash flow. So I fully agree with the sentiment. Mike, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick your viewpoint on inventory, especially during unpredictable times. We need to manage inventory cleverly. We need to know, like for example with COVID, there's less disposable income. What do we buy extra of, and what do we dispose of, and do we even need to manage inventory? What are your thoughts?
Look, inventory in any organization, small, big, large, is one of the biggest overheads you can have. And it's overheads that people don't really understand, is that you still need space, warehouse space, to keep it in. If you don't have that warehouse space, you've got to rent it. It's insurance. If something happens, theft, fire, damage, you need that overhead as well. So when it comes to running a stock management, I always say run it as lean as possible. Make sure you know your lead times. Make sure you're talking to your suppliers. That goes back to my original discussion, where become business partners with your suppliers. Be honest with your suppliers. I had a customer in the textile industry that came in, had millions and millions of rands sitting on the floor. We implemented a system, started 6 months. I get a call from the owner saying there's something wrong with the system, something wrong with the system. I said, what's wrong with the system? He says, no, I feel I'm not holding enough stock. I said, you are holding enough stock. We've planned. The system is planned. We've planned with you. We know when your lead times are coming. We know when you're coming in and out your stock's being delivered. He got more money back in his bank than he had sitting on his balance sheet. And as Ian said, that was cash he could use during COVID to keep his business running. So I think know your stock, know what you are selling, know what your customers are wanting. Goes back to the information on hand, and sit with your supplier. Make sure you know how long it's going to take lead time to get in. Don't go and just produce or buy because you're scared that people are going to want it later. It's the worst thing on hand is having stock that doesn't move, especially if it's got an expiry date. Trends change, so you've got to be very careful. I'm a true believer almost on the same method that they have in Japan with the car factories, just-in-time stock. Unfortunately, here being at the tip of Africa and being customs and the post office, it's a little bit harder to achieve, but start focusing on where can I cut my stock? Where can I move away from a international supplier to a local supplier? There's always someone locally that can produce the same quality at a better price and give it to you on time.
Very, very pragmatic advice there, and I really like that, the concept of moving your supply chain locally, less dependence on border regulations or border changes. Again, COVID was a massive learning experience, so moving a lot of that purchasing into South Africa, very, very, very pragmatic advice. I really like that. So on that note, folks, we're actually at time. Today's show seemed to have gone faster than I realized. We haven't gotten around to absolutely all of the questions and comments, so apologies for that. We absolutely will continue engaging with you. If you'd like to have your questions answered, just pop them into a survey and let us know what you would like us to answer for you, and we will respond to you one-to-one. We'll give you some tailored interaction and engagement. On that note, thank you so much for attending the show. I think it was a very valuable show, very pragmatic. I've certainly learned quite a lot. Thank you to both of our speakers. I think they've done a fantastic job in bringing some good insight to us. Thank you all again, and that's a wrap.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.